arriving in U.S. mail from St. Louis in the original de Havilland DH-4 biplane in 10 bulky gunny sacks are the combined audiobook renditions and supplemental background information as presented in podcast form by me, Robert P. Fitton. Good evening to one and all, wherever in the galaxy you make your home. We're moving to the 5th podcast of the incredible journey of Patch Kincaid back in time. Patch, as he remains on a diesel-powered boat off Florida with several high rollers in the intelligence realm, begins thinking about a man named Korbinski and how the general theory of relativity contains time-like curves. His intelligence captors hint that his father will be brought in from Japan. Korbinski says that since Patch is alive as a little kid in this time, that two of them cannot exist. If an event exists in time, that would give rise to a paradox, and then the probability of such an event happening is 0. Changing history itself is also a form of a paradox, creating a new timeline. If you understand all that, then please call me Collect and explain it. Aside from the gobbledygook, what I'm selling here is the idea that it can be argued that you can't travel back in time to a place where you already exist. Or can you? Or that by changing events, even small things can affect, like a butterfly spreading its wings, something down the timeline. Patch has hedged his bet that they will catch Dr. Stephen Higgins before he defects, thus preventing one of those pre-events that will prevent the destruction of the U.S. cities in 1986. The alternative is the CIA's Technical Service Staff, TSS, and the Chemical Division headed by the infamous Dr. Braun. And now, Part 5 of the Kennedy Paradox. Chapter 16. Aboard the Rex, Straits of Florida, Thursday, March 3rd, 1961, 10:11 a.m. When Patch stepped onto the Rex's deck, the thinning dark smoke from the upper stack drifted by him. The engines hummed through the open waters. The definite blue horizon line extended as far as he could see. Savage occasionally looked down from the bridge, and the soldiers were no longer at the rear of the vessel. Zamka leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. He never took off his sunglasses. "Good morning, Captain." "Zamka, where's Bart?" "The captain has other responsibilities. He told me about your conversation. You need to tell us who's gunning after the leaders of organized crime." Patch's stomach tightened. "I told Bart I wanted to meet with him. Can't afford to have people killed." Then they walked along the deck, and he looked up at Savage, scanning the horizon through his binoculars. "I object to that SOB Savage being on this vessel." "You're in no position to object to anything, Patch. You tell us major organized crime people are going to be taken out, yet you won't tell us by whom. These people are working with us right now to kill Castro. Maybe that's why Castro retaliated. Did you ever think of that?" Zamka held the railing and looked out to sea. "I can't argue with that. And if I divulge his name, you could change history." "Drop your cover, Patch. I'm weeding out the bullshit and trying my best to protect people." "Organized crime?" He turned to Patch. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Those people lost all their casinos when Castro took them. Millions of dollars. And we're trying to prevent a Russian footprint in Cuba. That's why we took your Higgins information so seriously." Tension pulled at Patch's neck and shoulders. Talking to people in Washington could change things. He remembered the textbooks, referring to an invasion of Cuba in December 1963, yet he sensed they were preparing for an invasion now. Had he changed things by returning to 1961? What about Korbinski's theories? "I'm sure Higgins will be found before he defects. That'll help because we can debrief him about his contacts." In the stiff breeze and scorching sun, Patch leaned toward the ocean. "Just let the whole thing play out." Patch spent the afternoon aft at the railing, sharing binoculars with the Cuban-born American named Spence Turling, who referred to himself several times as Macho. He had black eyes and dark thinning hair looped over, but he wore a New York Yankees cap to cover it all. When Batista left, so did I. I brought my family to Miami. Batista wasn't that bad as compared to Castro, said Patch. He placed his hand on Patch's shoulder. Now you know. Listen, I know these people your killer has targeted. God damn it, Patch, you need to tell us. You're aware that my life means nothing if I divulge that name. Not necessarily. You surely have additional information. We need these people and their expertise to kill the bastard in Havana. Do you understand? Listen, Spence, said Patch as he paused. You get me a meeting with the organized crime people and I'll tell them directly. Turtling nodded. Okay, I'll arrange it. The walkie-talkie on his belt sounded. Bring Kincaid up top. Turtling looked at Patch. You heard him. What now? Asked Patch. I'm not sure, so let's just go. As he clipped the walkie-talkie back on his belt, Patch noticed Turtling's pistol in his side holster. They backed toward the dark smoke along the deck rail. He panned the horizon as he moved up the metal spiral stairs. Zamka opened the cabin door. Bayo piloted the boat, and Savage manned the shortwave. We've located Antonio Curbelo, as I knew we would, said Zamka. 25 years later, Curbelo would finance a wide range of terrorist activities, possibly even the fatal nuclear devices. He doesn't know you, Kincaid, said Savage, headphones on his ears. Zamka sat on the window lip. He owns Curbelo's restaurant in Miami, Texas. I've had a few drinks there. A few? Laughed Turtling. Zamka grinned. How does a restaurant owner go to financing nuclear bombs? Asked Patch. Turtling removed his cap and used his fingers to flip his hair over. He works the rackets and slot machines and manages the financial assets throughout cities in the southern United States. He's connected to Carlos Marcello in New Orleans, replied Zamka. Savage, sneering at Patch, removed the headphones. Stan, Bob Dietrich is on the channel. Zamka nodded, moved up to Savage. He pointed at Savage's chest. Apologize to Kincaid. Come on, Stan. Zamka nodded to Turtling. Turtling removed his silver pistol. If I don't get you, Lieutenant, I have hundreds who will. Savage closed his eyes and pressed his lips like a little kid caught stealing money. He hung his head and shuffled over to Patch and spoke in a military cadence. Captain Kincaid, I apologize for my actions toward you. He saluted and exited down the stairs. Apology not accepted, grumbled Patch. Turtling smiled and placed the gun back in his holster. Bob, what do we do about Curbelo? Zamka sat on the edge of the counter, one headphone to his right ear, and nodded. I understand this, right? Jack LaRue? Then your people will trail Curbelo. What about the others? Okay? No, nothing. You'll be the first to know. Okay, Bob. Zamka out. What are we doing? Asked Turtling, stepping up to Zamka. I didn't tell him Kincaid wanted to meet with our friends. Arrange a meeting, Spence. Make it soon. Listen, word is already spreading about Patch's assassin. I'll get on it right away. Let's find the physicist. Agreed, replied Patch as he returned to the window. Stopping Carlos from killing the Mafia men would probably change history, depending on the validity of Krabinski's theories. But Patch sensed that killing Carlos would change everything. Aboard the Rex, Straits of Florida, March 3rd, 1961, 3:05 p.m. Savage leaned over the radar as the sweeping line circled 360 degrees around the green luminescent screen, producing a breakdown of vessels in the area. Stan, come over here! Zamka lowered the binoculars, squinted, and moved across the bridge. What have you got, Sergeant? I'm not sure, but I think we have images on both ends of the sweep that may converge. Patch moved forward with Bayo. On the western and eastern portions of the screen were two identical blips. The radio crackled. Zamka lifted the microphone. Go ahead.
This is Will Rutherford.
Howdy, said Zamka.
We're tracking two boats. One left Key West this morning, the other we believe has come from Cuba.
Zamka raised his brow. Patch returned to the window and lifted his binoculars. A red and white Coast Guard boat bobbed with the rolling waves to the north. He swung the binoculars toward the horizon, but didn't see the boats. "We have them on radar, Will."
Bring the wrecks toward the eastern vessel stand.
Zamka nodded at Bayo. Patch had wondered where the captain of the wrecks had been. The vessel began turning immediately. "Implemented, Will."
Stand by. This could be it.
The wrecks gently rolled in the water, and the engines produced a low, resonating hum and more dark smoke. Patch noticed a long black and red tanker further out to sea, but he didn't spot the Cuban boat. Zamka and Turtling were both perched at the bridge rail. Savage, rifle strapped over his shoulder, quickly descended the spiral stairs. Several soldiers appeared aft, and the machine guns were rolled into place. "Are we going to gun him down or just stop him?" asked Patch. Zamka kept the binoculars to his eyes. "That depends on Higgins." Patch spoke to Turtling. "Do you think Higgins is aboard that Cuban boat?" "All sorts of things go on down here, Patch. Hiding on speedboats, garbage containers, hot air balloons, floating rafts, you name it." A smaller white Coast Guard boat buzzed alongside the wrecks. Meinkewitz, wearing a blue windbreaker, waved at him from the craft. Savage and two other soldiers looped a metal ladder over the railing below and secured it in place. The tiny boat docked alongside the wrecks and gently rocked in the waves as Meinkewitz scurried up the ladder. The soldiers pulled him aboard the boat. He had a manila envelope in his hand and waved at Patch as he started down the deck. Savage pulled up the ladder, and the little Coast Guard boat veered off. Meinkewitz climbed the spiral stairs, and Zamka let the binoculars dangle. "You okay, Patch?" Patch nodded. Meinkewitz handed the envelope to Zamka. Zamka moved onto the bridge and pulled the materials from the envelope. "Ray, I need to know where they brought Kate. Is she all right?" He shook his head and studied Patch's bruised face. "I don't know. I've been in briefing sessions in Virginia. Who did this to you?" "You're a pal in mine, Sergeant Savage." "Well, this is bullshit. I'm calling Robert Asham." Savage has been reprimanded by Zamka, but I hate the son of a bitch. "He's a decorated vet. He's gone into places where others cut and run." "Good. Send him to hell. Will you do that for me, Ray?" The moron beats me with two other guys and then apologizes as if everything's going to be all right. Well, he was probably under orders. Who cares? Patch scanned the horizon. What was in the envelope? Intel on Higgins. "Kincaid, Meinkewitz," called Zamka, and he waved them over. Turtling looked over his shoulder at the contents of the envelope. In the black and white wire photo, a tall crew-cut man, clad in a long leather jacket, had one hand on a Corvette and held a briefcase with his other hand. "Recognize him, Patch?" Patch cleared his throat. "No. No, I never met this man." "Interesting. The photograph is Stephen Higgins, taken 2 months ago in Wisconsin. This is his car. He was getting money even then. It's important that he does not, and I repeat, does not go over to the Russians. It's vital. This guy will set in motion a chain of events that will destroy the United States. We've heard the story, Patch," said Zamka. Meinkewitz faced him. "Listen up, Patch. We've had people talking to his sister. She hasn't heard from him since last week, nor has the wife. Either the Russians killed him or they want him on their side. I'm more worried about retrograde. Without the proper 1986 power-up, it could happen soon." "I'm not going to listen to that time travel crap," said Zamka. "First things first," said Turtling. "Let's get Higgins." Patch and Meinkewitz moved toward the railing, but Meinkewitz motioned him down the stairs. They reached the deck and headed up front, away from Savage and his gang. "Patch, I'm the only person with these cowboys who understands retrograde. And more importantly, I'm the only person who believes your damn story." Patch stopped midway and viewed the long red tanker's hull on the horizon. "Ray, I will tell you more names, including the big enchilada. I know you will." He lit a cigar, and the smoke quickly swept into the undulating ocean air. "Some people pack a toothbrush when they travel. I pack cigars. But since Castro, I don't get the same quality. Nothing like a good Cuban cigar. Zamka shouted from a megaphone on the bridge.
We have a visual on the Cuban boat.
Patch instantly looked through the binoculars as the engines revved. More smoke rose skyward from the stack as the boat sloshed against the surf. Let's go up top, Patch. Patch nodded and they returned to the spiral stairs. Zamka leaned over the radar. Shit, screamed Turtling. Meinkewitz crossed the bridge. What happened? Zamka looked up. Goddamn Cuban boat was a diversion. What do you mean? Asked Meinkewitz. There's a plane approaching from Cuba. He stroked his chin. Maybe they have a backup with the boat. Well, where the hell is Higgins? Asked Meinkewitz. We're watching 2 vessels on the radar out of Key West, said Turtling. We need to intercept those boats once we confirm Higgins is aboard, said Zamka. Oh, just take down the plane, said Savage at the top of the stairs. I'm not going to start an international incident because we need cause, Sergeant, and Higgins is the justification. I say just take him out. Fortunately, you are not in charge. Now get below and await orders. Yes, sir. The guy is a loose cannon, said Patch to Meinkewitz as Savage descended the stairs. We have boats all over the place and a plane. The question, Patch, is where is Dr. Stephen Higgins? Chapter 17. Aboard the Rex, Straits of Florida, March 3rd, 1961, 4:15 p.m. The sinking sun on the western Caribbean horizon added an orange tinge to the red and white amphibious plane as it circled over the steely basin. Over a dozen Coast Guard boats were like ducks vying for breadcrumbs. This is a clusterfuck, complained the frustrated Zamka following the plane with his binoculars. They're laughing at us from that plane. Zamka, we've stopped 4 boats out of Key West, said Turtling from the radio. Zamka squinted and then exhaled. The plane trekked further south toward Cuba. Where do I bring this boat? Asked Bayo at the ship's wheel on the upper level. I need to call Dietrich, said Zamka. He started toward Turtling, but Turtling stood with the headphone to his ear. What do you hear, Spence? Turtling's black eyes were like an animal in the forest, sensing danger. Dan Preslin is sending out a general message. Let me see that, said Zamka as he placed the headphone over his ear. Patch followed the little white plane with the binoculars. Then he lowered the binoculars and faced Meinkewitz. All of this may not even be related to Higgins, Ray. This whole Cuban thing has everyone on edge, Patch. Meinkewitz chucked his cigar stub into the air and it disappeared into the ocean. Patch casually looked north. He steadied the binoculars when he caught a glimpse of the 2 men in a green fishing boat tracing the waves. Another plane approached from the east. Over there! Over there! I see it, said Zamka by the radar. Bring the goddamn boat around! Savage, with an automatic weapon in his hands, emerged screaming from the shadows. He set up a position next to the railing. Let's get the bastards! Hold your fire, shouted Zamka, still at the short wave. We may not have time for other vessels. We're heading up there. How fast, Bayo? 20 knots. 20 knots. We aren't that far. You might want to reconsider scrambling jets out of Homestead. Right. Okay. More Cubans and the 2 servicemen also brandishing rifles lined up next to Savage below. Another soldier manned the machine gun and back. What do you think? Asked Turtling. They got the jump on us. Bart says there's no way they're going to send jets up from Homestead. Kennedy is already scaling back the invasion. Patch did not remember an invasion of Cuba in 1961. It's a race between that plane landing in the ocean and us getting over there first. Again, Zamka positioned the binoculars in place. I'm sure that plane is a Cessna 172 Skyhawk, but I can't read the markings from here. Patch spotted the single green fishing boat as it circled into the forward area. I see him. I did too. That crew cut guy, just like the photograph, said Meinkewitz. Zamka, said Savage on the walkie-talkie. We need to start shooting. Zamka spoke into the walkie-talkie as he neared the railing. And spend all your ammo out of range? He cupped his hand. Sergeant, just hold up. Another man on the fishing boat caught Patch's attention. Younger and thinner, the sandy-haired Eric Bonheim stood with Higgins on the boat. Bonheim? What? Asked Meinkewitz. The tall guy in the boat. He'll be there when the other terrorist kills you at Sector 13 25 years from now. Meinkewitz raised his brow. Then he's an East German. His name is Eric Bonheim. What the hell is he doing here now? Kincaid says the tall man in the boat is an East German. Grimacing Savage turned with his gun pointed at him. How you know this man, Kincaid? That's not relevant, said Patch, lifting the binoculars again. Kincaid is a Soviet agent, sent here to stir up trouble. You're down here to screw up our suborbital flight at Canaveral, aren't you, Kincaid? Shut up, yelled Zamka. Without the binoculars, Patch visually tracked the circling plane, and Zamka turned to turtling. Another few minutes and we can be within distance to hit him. We should have had more men out here, Patch said to Meinkewitz. Patch, you don't understand. Kennedy's caught in the corner. He's got Khrushchev breathing down his neck. The Russians will have a shipment of MiGs and weapons in Havana by the 15th. Bonheim is the Soviet agent, said Patch. Meinkewitz lit another cigar. Well, that makes sense. Makes sense, Ray, that he and Higgins would link up after the Soviet Union fell apart. Fell apart? Asked Savage, now next to the two men. Fat chance. We're talking about the Russians, Kincaid. Why don't you just chill out? Patch shouted. As Savage went to grab his shirt, Patch unloaded a right cross that sent Savage to the deck. Zamka's mouth hung open and Turtling stared at Savage, groggy on the metal deck. I'm sorry, said Patch to Zamka. Savage sat up and moved his jaw. Don't be, replied Zamka with a grin. Savage stood and sneered at Patch. You'll get your chance, Kincaid. His chance? Asked Meinkewitz. Savage climbed the ladder to the top of the bridge. Zamka joined them at the railing. He yelled while looking through the binoculars. Higgins! I see Higgins on that boat! Oh, that's a real news bulletin, chuckled Patch. We have to fire at him, Zamka, said Turtling. Not yet. Still a distance away from the circling aircraft and the bobbing fishing boat, the Rex chugged at full throttle. Smoke formed a plume into the ocean air. What would you estimate that distance, Ray? Asked Zamka. Meinkewitz spoke with a cigar in his mouth. No more than 1.5 miles. I agree. Okay, Spence. Tell Savage and the men to fire when the goddamn plane lands. The sun highlighted both the plane and the fishing vessel. Patch waited with everyone until the plane had changed its pattern. As if coming in for a conventional airport landing, the amphibious plane leveled out and swooped down parallel to the boat, splashing across the waves as it slowed in the water. Ropes were thrown out from the fishing boat. Now! Cried Zamka. When Savage did not fire, Zamka positioned himself on the rail and fired his rifle toward the boat and the plane. Fire! Howled Savage. The machine gun produced a at-a-tat, at-a-tat, at-a-tat. The soldiers and the Cubans commenced firing, but the onslaught did not deter Higgins and Bonheim. Savage stood atop the roof. Hit the plane! Hit the plane! Never mind the friggin' boat! Another rifle barrage erupted as Savage leaped near Patch and then down the stairs. He fired his weapon just as someone launched a bazooka shell from the back. A huge explosion moved the water through the sky less than 100 yards from the boat. Zamka emerged from the stairs and joined them. He turned toward the plane, alternately looking out the forward window and back toward Savage. What's the problem? Several men ran out of ammunition and the machine gun fire ceased. Savage shouted as he looked toward the plane. That guy is going over to the Russians! The plane, moving less than 1 mile away, skimmed the waves. Patch stood with Meinkewitz at the front railing, but anger ripped his stomach. A dozen yards below, Savage compressed his tense face and raised his hands as the plane became airborne and lifted into the sky. Patch kicked the bottom rail. Not good. Meinkewitz stepped back for a second and stared at Zamka near the front of the boat. Patch folded his hands on the brass support. The little white plane now, flying below the puffy clouds, carried Dr. Stephen Higgins on the first leg of a 25-year journey destined to leave United States cities decimated in the future. He and Bonheim flew south, around 90 miles away from the mainland, to Cuba. Time has many passageways, said Meinkewitz. The salty air blew back Patch's hair. Get me to the Cuban camp, Ray. Then I can talk about killing the head terrorist from 1986. Menkiewicz's mouth slightly opened and he raised his brow. He squinted in the twilight and nodded. I'll pass that info on, Patch. I honestly don't know what the hell they're going to do with you now. Patch nodded and leaned on the railing as he gazed south again. Time disappeared with the bug-dot plane against the billowed clouds. At least if he were retrograded back to 1986, someone in 1961 needed to know about Carlos Sánchez. With Higgins now in Soviet hands, Patch had to kill Carlos, and perhaps members of organized crime could help him do it. Miami, Florida, March 4th, 1961, 12:17 a.m. 3 Cubans drove Patch away from the docks after midnight. The van quickly moved toward the brightly lit skyscrapers. The Flamingo Lounge's pink neon sign flashed against the rippling channel water. Patch leaned toward the front seat as the van slowed at the circular drive and stopped under a convoluted white canopy. Patch looked at his fatigues and wondered how they would admit him to such a fancy restaurant. A young guy with a black shirt and white khakis strutted toward the van. He had gold chains on his neck and silver jewelry on his wrists. The side doors opened and he smiled at Patch. Right this way, come with me, Chico. Who am I meeting with? I really wouldn't worry my little self about that. Patch pressed his lips and moved ahead of him through the brass-framed doors. A cigarette haze saturated the air-conditioned atmosphere. The guy motioned him across a black rug to oak stairs to his right. They moved up 3 floors to a smaller lounge with a long glass window overlooking the Miami Beach skyscrapers. A dark-haired man in a gray suit slid out of the enclosed red leather booth surrounded by floor lights. Captain Kincaid, my name is Frank Regano. Regano had a firm handshake. Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Regano. My pleasure. Have a seat. Patch sat across from him on the soft leather seat. Regano ordered drinks from a little waiter in a dark suit without asking Patch what he wanted to drink. Who exactly are you, Mr. Regano? I'm an attorney. I represent Mr. Trafficante, Mr. Marcello, and others. Okay. Listen, I've been briefed that Castro has targeted my clients as well as Mr. Giancana. Patch wondered if Regano doubled as an intelligence agent. Okay. The waiter set down 2 martinis in huge glasses. You don't believe me that I am who I say I am. I just don't know. Well, you'll have to use your own best judgment, and I can assure you that my clients are very grateful for this information, he said as he sipped the martini. You can even say they are indebted to you. My main goal is to kill this terrorist. I would say, Mr. Kincaid, that is our mutual goal. Where exactly did you get this information? Patch grinned and looked away. I think my credibility would be compromised if I revealed that. We're aware of your time travel cover, and we know about your girlfriend's story. Most importantly, we know you have no background, which is quite astonishing in itself. You guys don't miss a beat, he said, and then he slurped the martini. How do I know your people will go after this man? I assure you they will take appropriate measures. Patch inhaled and then folded his hands. His name is Carlos Sánchez, and I assure you the threat is real. He's part of Castro's G2 intelligence network. Regano wrote down Carlos's name into a black notebook. Then he signaled to the waiter and made a telephone gesture with his hand. The waiter quickly brought a white phone over the table and plugged it into the wall. Thank you, Gino. He spun a number on the gold rotary dial. He waited. Then someone answered on the other end. I have the name. Carlos Sánchez, a.k.a. part of Castro's G2? Yes, of course. Mr. Trafficante wishes to speak with you. Me? Asked Patch. Regano nodded and handed the phone to Patch. Hello?
Good evening, Captain Kincaid. This is Santo Trafficante.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Trafficante.
I am personally indebted to you, Captain. Fidel Castro has no respect for human life. He does not deserve to live, and neither does this man Sanchez, the leopard. We have contacts on the ground in Cuba. I was there in Havana for many years. We will find Sanchez and take care of the problem. Is there anything I can do for you, my good friend?
Kill Carlos Sanchez.
That is a promise I will gladly fulfill. Good night.
Good night. He handed the phone back to Regano. I think we'll make great progress tonight. Yes, I will. Good night. He set the phone back on the receiver and leaned toward Patch. You've made a friend for life, Mr. Kincaid. Santo Trafficante will do his best to take care of Sanchez. Good. Carlos Sanchez must die. At least 15 men, all armed and very few speaking English, were around or inside the little stucco house in the Coconut Grove section of Miami. They pushed Patch into a bedroom at the end of the small hallway. The door slammed and someone locked it from the outside. When he turned on the ceramic bureau lamp, he saw bars across the window. He splashed cool water across his sweaty face. Now, for the first time, he believed that Carlos Sanchez would be killed. He used the bathroom toilet, then he leaped onto the mattress and fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 18. Coconut Grove, Miami, Florida, March 8, 1961, 8:30 a.m. My name is Clarence Smirnich, said the fluffy, gray-haired man in the doorway. Patch opened his eyes in the sunshine through the barred window. A wiry tree with thick green foliage spread across the courtyard. Patch sat up and faced a slightly overweight guy, now 2 steps into the room. The man shut the door. Patch stroked his beard. What is this place? A holding area? Safe house? Right on both counts. 2 questions. Shoot. My fiancée. In Miami, she's fine. Patch swung his feet over the edge of the bed. I hope so. Then the most logical question, Mr. Smirnich, is how long will I be here? That depends on what kind of operative you are. As of right now, we feel as if you are holding back vital information. Patch stood for the first time and stretched. Apparently, Smirnich didn't know about his meeting with Regano. I told you about Higgins, didn't I? Right. After the fact. Not correct. You guys had a fair shot at Higgins and you let him get away. Touché. Smirnich's pacing made Patch nervous. Mr. Kincaid, you have the names of what you call future terrorists. Who are they? Patch laughed and walked up to him. If I give you names, you will eliminate me. Not so fast. A man like you with no background could be very valuable to intelligence operatives. You'll excuse me if I don't believe you. I've been in the Air Force for a dozen years. I know who I can trust, but I also verify. Smirnich's lips smiled. Be assured you will not see me after today. My assignment is to connect you with the man you say is your father, Colonel Robert G. Kincaid Sr. I am his son. His son is in Japan for now. How's that? He may be called to the phone. I don't ever remember being called to the phone. Smirnich's lips smiled. They said you'd stick to your time travel cover. What's the truth? Smirnich grinned. I see. He opened the door and motioned Patch into the hallway. You must have been grateful to the young lady that got your medical attention when your eye was injured. Patch stopped with Smirnich outside the living room. 3 Cubans in military fatigues stood with M1 rifles near the entrance in the kitchen doorway. My eye was saved, Mr. Smirnich, because a Marine put ice on my eye and got me to a hospital. Oh, really? I guess I had bad information. Right. At the kitchen table, a crew-cut young man worked a series of phones. Smirnich turned to Patch. We've established contact with the naval base at Aksugi. Colonel Kincaid is being brought to the phone. He does not know the nature of this call. Thank you, Mac. Will you admit your true identity if Colonel Kincaid disputes your story? Patch studied the beige rotary phones. Then he looked into Smirnich's blue eyes. You will not be able to make contact with my father, and believe me, having lost him in 1979, nothing would be greater than to talk with him again. Smirnich winced and exhaled. Mr. Kincaid, the line is open, isn't it, Mac? Admiral, this is McClellan again. Just checking the line status. He nodded at Smyrnage. Line is secure, Clarence. Well, Mr. Kincaid, do you want to go to the phone? Patch's heart pounded at the prospect of talking to his father again. Korbinski won't let me. Then you're Russian, said Smyrnage, and the Cuban at the door lifted his gun. No, I'm not. The Korbinski self-consistency principle. Never heard of it. You're starting to annoy me, Mr. Kincaid. If an event exists in time, then an event would give rise to a paradox. There would be a probability of 0 of that event happening. My father will not be on that phone with me. Get on that goddamn phone, Kincaid. I'm sick of this crap. Real sick of it. Mac lifted the phone. Patch put it to his ear, but he heard a dial tone. He shrugged his shoulders and handed the phone to Mac. I told you. How the hell did you do that? Asked Mac as he gave the receiver to Smyrnage. Get the naval base back on the line. Yes, sir. Search Kincaid, shouted Smyrnage to the Cuban at the living room doorway. Patch raised his hands and the man quickly checked his clothing. No pasa nada. What do you have there, Mac? Something keeps kicking it out. Also, part of that paradox is the possibility of creating a new timeline. Kincaid, you're going to stay in this house until hell freezes over. If I have to get a military radio, I will. The result won't change if it's a paradox. Why now? Said Smyrnage, pointing at Patch. You think we're just going to take this bullshit, Kincaid? I've got people who will shrink your mind like a prune on a hot sidewalk. Patch pressed his lips as the emotion churned. Not my fault. I told him if they got me to an actual exile camp, I would release names. Smyrnage thought as his face reddened again. You don't tell us what to do. We've got a world of crisis brewing and you're making up all this. I, for one, am going to request they beat the living shit out of you. He looked down at the red-haired Mac. What's the story? Line to Japan is out. Ah, screw it. Smyrnage opened the outside door and then slammed it. Patch noticed Mac watched him closely. All you zombies. What exactly does that mean? Asked Patch. I read it in Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. Heinlein wrote it. See, this young guy goes back in time. Oh, really? Asked Patch. Yeah, except, he grinned. Rather embarrassing, but, well, he becomes his own mother and father. I agree with you, Mac. If you get Colonel Kincaid on that line or any line, Mac's big blue eyes beamed as if he had just learned something new. I'll take that challenge. And get me that magazine, Mac. I'd like to read that story. 2 years ago, I think it was February or March. I'll get it for you. Paradox exists, Mac. It's an immutable reality, I think. Coconut Grove, Miami, Florida, March 8th, 1961. 3 p.m. Patch leaned toward the Motorola console TV when President Kennedy began a news conference from the State Department auditorium. A new group of Cubans assumed positions at the House entrance about an hour ago. In front of 2 American flags, Kennedy arrived with a flashy smile that made Patch lean forward. He remembered Jack Kennedy in his late 70s, white-haired and New England voice. 2 microphones faced the young president just over the presidential seal attached to the podium. Kennedy carried his notes and himself with a flair that Patch found compelling.
I have several announcements to make. First, I want to say a word in behalf of Radio Free Europe, which is now making its annual appeal for support from all our citizens. For more than 10 years, this enterprise has been reaching out to people in Europe, Eastern Europe, with truth and devotion to liberty as its message. While this radio is at work, with listeners numbering in the millions, the competition of ideas in these countries is kept alive. The individual Americans, by giving to Radio Free Europe, may be sure that they are bringing a beacon of light into countries to which millions of us are tied by kinship and whose hope for freedom all of us must share. This is a peaceful concern, but a firm one. Radio Free Europe needs and deserves our generous help. Secondly, Mrs. Kennedy and I are giving an afternoon reception at the White House next Monday for the Latin American ambassadors to the United States, the Council of the OAS, as well as members of Congress concerned with Latin American affairs. I will take the opportunity at the close of the reception to make a major statement of some of my views about the problems of the Americas.
Ahmed Tobacco preceded 3 American soldiers entering through the outside kitchen door. Patch did not recognize any of them, but he suspected they belonged to the same intercept group. The first guy, as tall as a basketball player, had a U.S. paratrooper badge sewn into his dusty fatigues. He tucked his pistol in a side holster. The second guy wore a baseball cap and fatigues, open at the neck, and smoked Ahmed Tobacco in his pipe. The third soldier had short hair, a tight mustache, and sideburns, said the paratrooper. Then he caught sight of Kennedy's news conference.
And this is the last statement. The Cuban Red Cross, the American Red Cross, and U.S. Navy today combined in a 3-way effort to combat a polio breakout in Guantanamo City, Cuba, some 31 miles from the naval base. Early today, the Red Cross director at the U.S. Naval Base in southeastern Cuba had a phone call from a male Red Cross nurse in Guantanamo City saying there was an outbreak of polio with 3 children dead and 10 more stricken. All available vaccine had been used by the hospitals in Guantanamo City, and aid was needed to give vaccine for at least 100 more children, which they were unable to obtain. The Red Cross director at the base got permission from Admiral Edward J. O'Donnell to send all the vaccine which could be spared. She carried and sent enough vaccine for 160 first inoculations to the Northeast Gate, where she met the Cuban Red Cross ambulance where the transfer was made. I want to take this opportunity and this incident to emphasize again that our difference of opinion on matters affecting Cuba are not with the Cuban people. Rather, we desire the closest and harmonious and friendly and most sympathetic ties with them.
Logan, make contact with Guantanamo. Anything Intercept can do to expedite that polio vaccine. Understood, he said quickly and exited the kitchen.
Mr. President, I'm sure you're aware, sir, of the tremendous mail response that your news conferences on television and radio has produced. There are many Americans who believe that in our manner of questioning or seeking your attention, that we're subjecting you to some abuse or a lack of respect. I wonder, sir, in this light, could you tell us generally your feelings about your press conferences to date and your feelings about how they're conducted?
Well, you're subject me to some abuse, but not to any lack of respect, I don't think.
The press room erupted in laughter. Patch understood what his father meant about Kennedy's charm.
I must say that I do know that there are difficulties, but and I know that it places burdens on members of the press to have to stand up, particularly when I'm not able to recognize them. On the other hand, if it were changed and one member stood up, then perhaps that would not be a satisfactory device. So that I think that along with the old saying about don't take down a fence till you know why it was put up, I would say that we should stay with what we now have.
Mr. President, the approach to a peaceful settlement in Laos seems to have run into a dead end with the rejection by 2 of the proposed members of the 3-nation Neutral Commission. And the Soviet Union apparently still insists upon the approach of an ICC action there and an international conference. I wonder if in your review of the situation you've reached any conclusions as to what step the United States should now take to avoid the expansion of the war in Laos.
Well, the United States had been hopeful that it would be possible to set up some procedures where neutral nations could guarantee the security of Laos and also isolate it from military pressures on both sides. We're going to have to consider what other procedures might be followed to achieve that goal. But this is a matter now of discussion with our friends and with others, and I'm hopeful that we can achieve a result which will bring stability to Laos, permit it to maintain its independence, bring peace to the area, and self-determination.
Kennedy talked about neutrality and some of the neutral nations guaranteeing the security of Laos. Neutrality my ass, said Patrick. These people don't know what it's like to be on the ground. You'll have Cuba neutral, for Christ's sakes, said the pipe smoker. Take it you guys have come here to get me to talk, said Patch as Kennedy continued. Patrick looked at Kennedy and then at Patch. Direct, I like that. Yeah, who the hell are you? He stood and extended his hand. Captain Patch Kincaid. Captain? Asked Patrick as Patch shook the other man's hand. Yes, sir. Captain, I'll go along with that. Look, if you wish to watch the president... No, I'm okay. I understand you want to be brought to a training camp. What makes you think there are training camps? Patch still believed that no one knew about his meeting with Regano. You guys are the ones who are invading Cuba. Patrick looked at the other guy and then stepped forward. I'm Sloan Wilbur. Sloan? He slowly removed the pipe from his mouth. You want to find your so-called head terrorist. Why? Are you supposed to link up with this guy? Only if I can kill him. Well, shit. Other than he's probably a commie. He blew up American cities in 1986. Wilbur smoked with the pipe in his mouth. That shit isn't gonna work with us, Kincaid. You can save yourself a lot of pain and suffering if you just tell us the truth. Patch said nothing and stared at the president. Kennedy talked about having discussions with Khrushchev.
On the assumption that Mr. Thompson has by now caught up with Mr. Khrushchev, I wonder if you could tell us the contents of your message to the Soviet premier and what the thinking was behind this message at this time. Well, I would think that it would be more properly a matter that would best be left to Mr. Thompson and Mr. Khrushchev. It is a letter to me, and I think it would be discourteous and unwise to reveal such a letter without any indication that it's been received and some response given. As far as the purpose of the letter was to give, in general, some of my views on the questions which are at issue now around the world, and also to indicate my strong confidence in Ambassador Thompson to speak for me and for our country at this time in any discussions he might have with Mr. Khrushchev.
I would personally cut off the balls of that little Stalingrad bastard. Then he turned to Patch. First priority, we have a radio transmitter that will be brought into this house. We'll get Colonel Kincaid on the radio and blow your story to smithereens. Good luck, he said as Logan returned. I told them we will volunteer as many guys as they needed to distribute the vaccine. What happens now? Asked Patch. Patrick removed 2 thin paper transmissions from his pocket and handed them to Patch. The crew cut Higgins, hugged Fidel Castro. In the next photo, he walked up wide stone steps to a public building. It's the traitor, my friend, buddy-buddy with Fidel. We have teams on the ground who will attempt to kill Higgins. I just want to be brought to a training camp. I know my guys at double-cross it for sure. Just tell us who he is, said Patrick, and then you kill me. Patrick took the photos and tucked them in his pocket. We'll be back with the transmitter. The other 2 soldiers quickly exited. Patch did not regret withholding Carlos's name from the soldiers. Trafficante, a more prudent choice, had the means to kill Castro, but the intelligence agencies would pressure Patch until they got answered. Chapter 19. Coconut Grove, Miami, Florida, March 13th, 1961, 4:13 a.m. For over 15 minutes, he had not heard the annoying trumpet solo. For days, the Cubans had played the scratchy 45 record non-stop. Each time the trumpet sounded, he woke up abruptly. Then they questioned him. Men he did not know would ask him for the names of the future terrorists, and they demanded to know his real identity. Good morning, Patch. Dietrich and Spence Turtling moved into the living room. Had enough? Patch yawned. You need to let me have some sleep. I don't need to let you do anything except rot here. You're starting to piss a lot of people off, said Turtling. Bring me to the training camp. You can tell me right now what you know, said Dietrich. Just shut off that dumbass record. Dietrich backed up to the record player. As the Cuban soldier watched, he lifted the needle off the vinyl disc. How's that, Patch? Thanks. Now you can let me go to the bedroom and get some sleep. Dietrich lowered the needle and the scratchy trumpet solo punctuated the morning stillness. Damn you! You don't hold things back from us. We're in the middle of a complex operation and we don't have to listen to your penny-ante crap. I have nothing to say. And you know what, asshole? Asked Turtling as he grabbed Patch's chin. Two soldiers descended upon him and pushed rifle barrels into his face. We could just blow your head off, said Dietrich. Won't get any information that way. Maybe not, but I'll get my jollies. Tell us what you know. Nothing to tell. You son of a bitch. Dietrich exhaled and shook his head as the 45 ended. Ignacio will be here later. Ignacio believes that you're a G2 agent for Castro, Patch. You can listen to your buddy, President Kennedy, in another news conference as you answer Ignacio's questions. Somebody slid the needle onto the 45 again and Patch covered his ears. Coconut Grove, Miami, Florida, March 13th, 1961, 9:58 a.m. They started the 45 again. Dietrich ushered a wiry little man with dark hair and a prominent forehead into the living room. Patch rubbed his itchy eyes. The other man wore military khakis and had shiny black boots. I am the leader of the Freedom for Cuba movement, Ignacio. Patch did not open his eyes. I have come over here today to talk reason with you. The only reason I know would be sleep. I understand they have been using sleep deprivation as a part of their interrogation. My movement needs your information. I have here a list of individuals. He removed a folded yellow paper from his pocket. Your information can be a matter of life and death for many people here in the United States, and bring me to a training camp and I will release the information. I do not think that is in the cards. Let me name a few individuals you and Fidel may want to alert us to. Jose Plazo, Luis Contro, Juan Amica, Carlos Sánchez, Sergio Del Rios, Jose Alante, and Manuel Ricos. Are any of those individuals coming to America to kill members of the exile community? I know none of those people. Mr. Kincaid, I can make you a part of our movement when we eliminate Castro. I have fought Castro and I know people in high places within the U.S. government. I have a friend named Raul Ramirez who was recently taken prisoner by Castro. I need any intelligence that can be provided to get him out. Please keep that in mind. Sorry, I know nothing. I just need sleep, do you understand? Patch lunged toward the record player. One of the soldiers blocked his way and hit his shoulder with the blunt end of his rifle. Shut that damn record off. The outside door opened. A truck engine reverberated in the yard. Yeah, over here. Back it up. Back it up. Into the kitchen, every component. Patch held his shoulder as he sat down on the couch again. Additional voices outside became louder as several men moved something into the kitchen. Dietrich stepped out of the kitchen. Well, Patch, which one of those names? None. I'm sorry, Ignacio. Ignacio walked across the room to Dietrich. We tried. Do you wish us to take him? No. We'll deal with him right here. Mr. Kincaid, till we meet again, sir. Patch nodded with his head in his hands. A few minutes passed. Then he heard Mac's voice. Patch. Mac held a yellow and blue covered magazine. Told you I'd get you the magazine. Thanks. He handed the magazine of fantasy and science fiction to Patch. You may need some sleep before you read these stories. Got that right, Mac. We're going to contact Colonel Kincaid at 10:30. Patch just shook his head. I'll call you. He heard his name 4 times. Then he opened his aching eyes. Rise and shine. You're not funny, Dietrich. Wasn't trying to be. They have the naval base at Atsugi on the radio, Kincaid. Patch, his eyes mostly closed, stumbled into the kitchen. The wood table housed a series of flat radio components with gauges, knobs, and lighted panel. Max spoke into a silver slotted microphone and listened through cut black headphones. The kitchen reeked of solder and last night's hash. Atsugi, this is Wonder Bread. He listened and then flipped a panel switch for the speakers. Dietrich's confident smirk angered Patch. This is the end of the line, Patch. Colonel will disavow any knowledge of you and your cock and bull story.
Wonder Bread, we redo.
Atsugi Base, we are officially requesting Colonel Kincaid contact at this time. After a short delay, the voice crackled in the speakers.
There will be a delay.
The astounded Dietrich, like a frustrated singer, grabbed the microphone. Atsugi Base, why the delay?
Colonel Kincaid has been delayed.
Patch tilted his head back and laughed. See, Dietrich? See, I told you, it won't work.
Unknown at this time.
Will you kindly tell me why the hell Colonel Kincaid has been delayed?
It's his car, sir.
Oh, bullshit. You call us when the Colonel gets to the radio, or when he's even on his way. It's imperative we talk to him.
Yes, sir.
As Patch grinned, Dietrich scrambled to his feet and pointed at him. You cut your shit, Kincaid, or whoever the hell you are. I've lost my patience with you. We have people who will get the truth out of you whether you want to tell it or not. Chapter 20. Coconut Grove, Miami, Florida, March 23rd, 1961, 5:30 p.m. Patch figured he had slept for nearly 18 hours. Dietrich had not been at the house since they failed to make contact with his father last week. Patch leaned on the couch arm and read the Heinlein story in Science Fiction and Fantasy magazine. He enjoyed Heinlein shaking up history. Hey, Kincaid, said the blonde-haired guy in the kitchen. What's up? Dietrich is on his way over here. He's going to use the radio. He's wasting his time. Well, they have to get the Colonel on the radio sometime. You want some hash? Beggars can't be choosers. It will be ready for you in a few minutes, beggar. Patch rolled his eyes but caught sight of movement outside. Dietrich, carrying a tan briefcase, moved in with Zamka through the courtyard. A few moments later, the back door opened. Dietrich stepped ahead of Zamka into the living room. He stopped and stared at Patch. Who provided you with the reading material? Peter Cottontail. You know something? You are a wise ass, Dietrich said, pointing once again. I understand you're going to try and get my father on the radio. Dietrich set the briefcase on the wood table. This is true. Patch set down the magazine on the couch. I need to be brought to a training camp. We can track down your guy, Patch. We have people on the ground in Cuba. Dietrich folded back a report in his hand. I have a secret report here, Kincaid. Our basic policy paper approved by Big Kennedy last week. Dietrich opened the report to tab B, a section marked in red ink capital letters. It's an outline of what we're planning to do in Cuba. The reason I bring it up here is to show you we have capacities to get your guy. Eyes only, secret propaganda. Why show me this, asked Patch. Look at it. We have shortwave stations in Massachusetts and Florida, also in Caracas and Guatemala City, as well as our station on Swan Island. Here's my point. We need to get the word out to your guy. Patch sat down again. What word? Then tell us. We'll lure him in and kill him. Oh, really? On my say-so? Come on, I don't believe you. Screw you, Kincaid. Like I believe you. You come out of nowhere with this absurd time travel story. Bartenders and psychiatrists learn nothing that is stranger than the truth. What's that supposed to mean? He held up the magazine. All us zombies, Robert Heinlein. Good quote. Now let's get in the kitchen. You staying for dinner? Asked Patch. Zamka grabbed his shirt. You're on thin ice, Patch. Don't you get it? Patch thrust his arms up, breaking Zamka's grip. The three men moved into the kitchen, but Dietrich looked at the radio. The Colonel blows your sci-fi bullshit out of the water, then we can talk. Atsugi Base, this is Wonder Bread. Wonder Bread calling Atsugi Base.
It's Atsugi. Ready for transmission, Wonder Bread.
You're all done, Patch. Do you have Colonel Kincaid there?
Roger, Wonder. Switching to Colonel Kincaid.
I copy, Etsugi. No tricks. Go ahead, Colonel. After 30 seconds, you check the readings. What the hell is going on here? Radio's working, said Zamka. He turned the band and other transmissions were audible. How are you doing this, Kincaid? Won't work. What is it? They're telling me a solar flare has disrupted the radio transmissions around the world. Gorbinsky, the theory of general relativity, contains closed time-like curves. Shut up, Kincaid. The only Russian Gorbinsky we checked on just graduated from Moscow State University. Solar flares. You know this, Gorbinsky, said Zamka. You knew friggin' Higgins was defecting, Patch. You're working for the Russians. Channel did not connect to Japan. I'm wondering if you work for the Russians, Kincaid. Just how do we kill Gorbinsky? No, don't do that. Really? Why are you so concerned about a Russian student? You will change time if you kill him. You know something? I've just reached the damn limit with your time travel story. You, my friend, will get your request. You want to go to a training camp? Fine. We'll arrange it. Thank you. Don't thank me too soon. You have a doctor's appointment. What? Dr. Sidney Braun. Zamka smiled and then turned away as Dietrich growled. You, sir, are going to tell us your story. You had your chance without Dr. Braun. Now we will take over. Patch, having alerted the Mafia about Carlos Sanchez's plans to kill their leaders, is dropped off at a safe house in Miami where Robert Dietrich grills him. Patch watches an extended news conference by JFK, interrupted by Interpen mercenary soldiers who do not seem happy with JFK's talk about Cuba and the Russians. Bob Dietrich tries twice to contact Colonel Robert Kincaid, Patch's father, in Atsugi, Japan, at the naval base, and twice he fails. Dietrich becomes even more furious and threatens Patch. When he doesn't change his time travel story, Dietrich orders Patch to be brought to Central America and suffer at the hands of Dr. Braun. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. Next week, things will turn from bad to worse for Patch. I'll be there as your host as we near the time of the Bay of Pigs invasion. Until then, adios, amigos. All of my books are available in paperback, Kindle, and audio at www.fittonbooks.com, or you can look at the list of audiobooks separately at pizzazz-pizzazz.com.